Hey guys, don't forget, send anyone our way who needs help with college or who is sending a student to college. College planning the right way requires an expert. Book a free consultation at elitecollegiateplanning.com. Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Joe Kerins. Today, we have the distinguished pleasure of interviewing Dr. Kristen Eccleston. Kristen, welcome to the show. Glad to have you. And I think this is going to be a cool conversation for everybody.
I'm looking forward to it. And thank you so much for having me on.
So why don't we start with what you're all about? Give us the lay of the land, right? It has to do with mental health, education, all that, but give us your elevator pitch, if you will.
Sure. So I think usually an elevator pitch is supposed to be short, right? But to give you a little bit of foundational knowledge for my elevator pitch. So I was a special education teacher for a very long time in a school district right outside of the Washington, D.C. area. I loved being a special education teacher. And towards the end of what I like to call my in-classroom career, I had the opportunity to help create a program or a special education program, but I specifically made it for students with mental health needs. Because unfortunately, in this world, in the education setting, even if you don't have a lot of academic needs, if you do have that social emotional component, in order to get some additional supports, you have to have that special education title kind of go along with it. So this program was really just tailored for high school students who were school avoidant, who had dealt with hospitalizations, anxiety, depression, and the school environment was just really overwhelming for them. So I was really fortunate to have a wonderful team I worked with, and was really, really interested in what was happening, of why I was seeing so many students with mental health needs. When we first started the program, we started with 5 students. Within a 5-year time period, we had 58 students. So that was a pretty significant jump. And in trying to find the answers to that, I went back to school, got my doctorate in mind, brain, and teaching. And I focused my research specifically in mental health in the education setting. Fast forward, what I do now is I left teaching in the classroom setting, and now I work specifically with families of students who have social emotional needs to some degree, and I help them advocate to the school systems for the supports and services that they need for their child to be successful. I also work with corporate settings and school settings to try and help with that mental health neurodiversity aspect into developing some kind of either programming or training to help school systems either serve students who have mental health needs or serve corporate settings who have employees who are either neurodiverse or dealing with mental health needs. So that's kind of me in a nutshell and what I currently do at this time.
So a lot more people have mental health issues now than ever have. COVID has been an absolute bear on students in general. I mean, I think we'll leave the way it was handled out of it, but the reality of the way it was handled was basically kids, their learning was curtailed. Their ability to have one-to-one instruction was basically eliminated. All of the typical historical ways we taught were upended. And in our job and position, I've seen an incredible amount of people that they're just not where they need to be. And it causes additional stress and anxiety. So in your work, first of all, do you agree that this is now becoming its own problem more so than it was? And I think it's fascinating too, that even when you started 5 to 60 in a very short period of time, I don't know that there's a child out there that hasn't struggled in some way with mental health over this period of time.
Oh, 100%. And that 5 to 60 was before the pandemic. So, I mean, so this was already something that was an issue before the pandemic. And now that I have shifted to just working with families independently, I don't even think I realized at the time that I mean, I realized there was an issue. That's why I put that focus there. But I don't think I realized the significance of the issue. You know, I think I thought mental health was something that was definitely becoming more of age, you know, like as you got into that middle school, into that high school. But I have students as young as first grade now who I work with the family, and there's hospitalizations associated with it, or even suicidal ideations associated with it. And I don't think I even knew what that concept was when I was in elementary school. So to see such young people dealing with it is such a significant thing. And you're right, the pandemic definitely contributed to this issue, hands down. You had several years of students, no matter what the age range of where they were, if they were in high school when they were going through the pandemic, elementary, they lost social skills and critical age, especially in elementary, for that social skill development. I think you're seeing a lot of teacher shortages that are also now a result of this. And then so you're seeing behaviors in the classroom because you're getting people who are not necessarily veteran teachers in there who have the strong classroom management on top of the students not having that typical social development. I mean, honestly, I feel like there are multiple rabbit holes we could go down, and I'm happy to go down any of the ones that you would like to. But there's so many things. There's not like this one thing that, oh, this is the issue. This is what contributed to it. It's like this perfect storm of things that have just been brewing over time. And the pandemic was just the catalyst that has created it all to come to this head of us having this massive issue.
Well, and I think we talk about when we're helping families in the college arena, we talk about the social, emotional, and academic and financial fit of a school, like the Venn diagram with multiple points in the middle of where you want to be. And that the lack of social engagement, I mean, I've seen it in even students not, go back to like when we were kids, right? My dad, look them in the eye, shake their hand. Yes, no, yes, sir, no. Like that kind of stuff it's hard to come by these days. And I think a lot of it has to do with exactly what you're talking about, where you're just that repetition that almost exists in the classroom where you're you know, I want to call it conditioning, but it's for, I mean, training, conditioning, whatever, education, it's all part of that same thing. And I mean, I even noticed with my own children, I had 4 kids under the age of 11. So all of them dealt with trying to learn via, you know, an iPad for a year and a half. I'm constantly reiterating the things that I would think would be commonplace at this point, and they're not. What is there I mean, I know you said there's a lot of different components that add to where it is now, but prior to the pandemic, was there a more narrowed scope as to where the mental health stemmed from? And I don't want to, again, I'm not a doctor, I haven't studied this, but the reality that I always faced was there was always a subset of kind of predisposition, hereditary type mental health disorders or diseases. But now it seems like it's a wide reaching, and it's not, you can't credit all of the mental health issues to someone's parents or grandparents or that. There's now a broader subset of it, you know, and I look at autism as kind of that original where, hey, you have someone who's autistic, you can hardly tell, and then you have someone who's severely autistic in the spectrum of that. Where's the mental health world in that?
So I can give you some of my theories, and then I can tell you some of my research too. So from a research perspective, what I did was try to identify why this was such an increasing trend. And what I found in my research specifically was that at least in the school setting, a lot of educators don't know what mental health looks like. They don't understand what it is. They don't have a strong working knowledge of it. And that's not to point fingers or anything at teachers. Teachers are not provided a mental health one-on-one in their university studies. And this is kind of a newer trend if you really think about it. Even when I was younger, if you went to an adult and you said, you know, I think my feelings are feeling a certain way, it was kind of like suck it up and deal with it kind of mentality. So I feel like our validating of feelings is a newer thing, and we're kind of just starting to explore that. And teachers just don't know what it looks like. And there's two types of students when it comes to mental health. You have what I like to call the extrovert or the squeaky wheel student, the student that something is going on, right? They're picking up chairs, they're cursing you out, they're creating a scene. And so services are often provided at some level of degree to them. But then you also have the type of student who is that introvert student, that student who they should be getting A's, but they're getting C's. So they're not raising that red flag of something being wrong, because in school world, they're getting by. They're still passing, but they're not living up to what they can live up to. They're kind of disengaged. They're quiet. They don't cause an issue. They don't create a scene. They just sit there in the back of the classroom, disengaged. But really, there's a lot going on inside their mind, but it's not happening outward. And because it's not happening outwards and they're not these blatant red flags, that's why they're getting missed. And then it gets missed to the point where then it hits a wall and the student is then getting hospitalized, or the student needs more services, or they've become completely school avoidant and won't go to school at all. And now they're in high school, and you can't just get a 5'8" boy up and out the door anymore kind of thing. And so parents are kind of at a loss of what to do. So that, to me, that's one factor. Another factor, and this is more of a theoretical, but it has been studied. I just have not personally studied this, but there's a great book out there, and I want to say it's called Nation of Wimps. The author is eluding me right now, but it talks about our parenting skills over the last several generations. And I like to think of it as coming from a place of love from parents. And I'm a parent too, so I know, and if you're parents, too, seeing your child hurt does not feel great. Whenever our child is hurting to any degree, we want to swoop in. We want to fix it. We don't want our child to hurt. And for whatever reason, our kind of last several generations of parents, we seem to be much more in tune with some of those feelings that we had when we were younger. We remember what it felt to come in last place or not win, and it was yucky. And we have done everything we can, I think, from a place of love to try and help our children not have to experience some of those yucky feelings. But it ended up being a detriment to our children, because we're finding now, especially for our college age students, that they go off to college and now a breakup is the end of the world. And we know breakups suck, but it's now the end of the world because they didn't have that ability to kind of have the resiliency and perseverance skills that we naturally gain along our childhood, because our parents swooped in and protected us and stopped us from having to sit with any of those yucky feelings. And now as young adults, we don't know how to cope with it. And I think that's why we're seeing some of the levels of mental health and suicidal ideations that we're seeing, is because parents, out of a place of love, so I'm not pointing fingers again, but out of a place of love, have prevented students or children from having to kind of gain those skills that are necessary in order for us to just deal with some of the things that happen naturally in life.
Yeah. And I hate to say this, but I observe often, I've got 4 young kids, so I'm everywhere. I'm on a baseball field, soccer field, indoor facilities, gymnastics, swim clubs. And I used to elbow my wife, like, hey, check this out. And you're watching the helicopter, or the kid falls down and waits to see a parent. When the parent sees them, they start crying, and the parent comes over and coddles them, like, put some dirt on it, rub it off, like get up and go. And I think, and I'm dealing with my child right now, who's borderline gifted, program not, and is it really a push to go? And she, on a borderline setting in that environment, when you do gifted testing, it's a no. Essentially, like you're borderline, but it could be detrimental to do it. And she's learning right now at 11 years old, like how to deal with that emotion, that it's not the right thing, or you didn't make it, or you didn't get there. And I've always used sports to try and teach a lot of that losing and character building and resiliency. And that, I think we're losing some of that, and again, participation awards are not a good thing. From a standpoint of like, hey, not everybody gets a cookie, right? Not everybody gets a trophy at the end of the season. It's the team that worked the hardest and won gets it. And it teaches children 2 things. I think it teaches them how to work hard to get that trophy, but at the same time, when they don't get it, it teaches them to deal with those feelings. And those feelings only get bigger when you don't get the job or the promotion, or you don't get into the school that you wanted to get into. And I mean, rejection is a part of life. And if we fail to teach people how to accept it and cope with it, it's going to manifest later.
Yes.
When you're saying that, the one thing that just jumped out, my daughter this week, she says to me, because she's playing basketball right now and she's 8. So we were talking about high school and basketball. And she said, well, it's not whether the team wins or loses. It's just that everybody gets to play the same amount of time. And I was like, I had to sit her down and explain to her that that's not how it works. She was shocked to realize that in like 4 to 5 years, like, not everybody makes the team. Not everybody gets to play. And I had to sit her down and talk. And it was shocking to her to have to understand, like, oh, I can't just not put in effort and work and still get to play as much as everybody else. But it was one of those, okay, like the perception, like that's kind of how it's, perceived. And she's young and that's what it is all about right now. But in hearing some of the things that you mentioned, I think that is a fine line too. When we talk about, as parents, the rub dirt on it, like the idea of, okay, you need to figure this out, but also making it seem that you're not there to be willing to help. Yeah. Right. I think that is a very fine line that some parents, they help too much. Some parents now, they don't help enough, thinking they're doing what's best for the kids that they learn. But now the kids are learning that it's wrong to ask for help. I don't get help when I ask for it. And so I think that's a very interesting take on how you, and what my mind was going through was like, all right, well, when the kids have issues, it's, well, let's see if we can help them solve it themselves without solving it for them. It doesn't mean we don't help them solve the problem, but the more that we can kind of give them the responsibility of solving it, that's when they start to learn those life lessons that I think can go a long way. So it was interesting what you were saying. The one question that I have, especially with the difference in parenting, like I know how I was raised. And I still say it, we said it on many podcasts, that I thank God that social media was not around what it is today when I was growing up. How much of an impact do you think that plays? And not just, I mean, you hear of online bullying, things like that, but I also think the biggest problem with social media is that when you're on there, people post things that, I don't want to say fake, but it seems like everybody's life is perfect. And if that's not you, you start to get that depressed feeling. How much do you think social media and like that has had a role in the rise of mental health issues?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'd say for this, I think this question spans not just youth, but adults too, right? Yeah. And you're right. We only put the highlight reel of our life on social media, right? I mean, there's the occasional person who is seeking attention, but the mass majority of us, right, are like, look at this wonderful vacation I've been on, or look at this award that I've got. So we only ever put the highlight reel on there because we want that admiration, right? We want to feel good. We want people to think, oh, look, everything is going well. We tend not to be like, oh, my job went this way today, or, I got in this fight. We just don't post those things. So I think we forget about them. We just see these positive things, and then we start to compare ourselves, right? Oh my gosh, so-and-so went on this, Greek Isles vacation. I can't even afford to go to the Best Western down the street right now. What am I doing wrong in my life that this person can do this and I can't? And so I do think it leads to it. And there's some really great documentaries out there that show that a lot of people who really focus on that too, it's not even real. They'll get close enough to the Ritz-Carlton or something and fill up a baby pool in a backyard and put some rose petals in it and make it look like they're having a spa day and tag the Ritz-Carlton. But that's not what's happening. It's like this facade that's happening. I know in LA too, you can even go in and you can rent a set that looks like it's a private jet, but it's really almost just kind of like a set of a private jet for an hour. So it looks like you're taking selfies on this private jet. So there's so much that's not even real. And that's one of the biggest things I try to tell youth or adults, that you don't even know if what people are posting is actually happening. And if you stop and think too, everybody has a positive thing that's going on in their life, but everybody also has negative things. But you're only seeing everybody's highlight reel. But I think 100% what you were saying, it is contributing to people's mental health. I think social media has a lot of pros and a lot of cons. Those are definitely some of the cons. I think there's pros in the sense that it has also opened the door, though, for people to be more aware that, hey, I'm not alone. Some of my struggles that I've had, ADHD, even though I have other issues with everybody posting and all of a sudden being experts on ADHD on TikTok, but at least to some degree, it's showing people that, hey, you're not alone. Some of the quirks that you had or some of the things that you're experiencing, I experienced too. You're not some anomaly or a weirdo or anything like that. You know, you've got a tribe of people who are also going through the same thing. And so on some degree, I think that is a positive thing. But you're right. I mean, it's hard to decide, though, like, does that positive outweigh that negative? What is that negative contributing to? Then with youth, you have all that cyberbullying that happens, and youth definitely don't understand that when you post something, it posts forever. So there are so many factors. And that's why I said early on, like, it's hard to pinpoint it's this one thing or it's that one thing, because it's this perfect storm of many things that have created the issue that we're facing right now.
I have another thing that I've been saying a lot recently that it's probably going to go over like a...
Here we go.
But when I grew up, I was the youngest kid in the neighborhood. Right? Mm-hmm. I had an older brother who, I love him, but he was not always nice to me as a kid, right? And his friends, and, you know, I was always the young kid around all these. And I was taught that sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like we've forgotten that. Like, just because you said it doesn't make it true. You don't like me, okay? I'm sorry. I would like you to like me, but if you don't, I can't do anything. If you want to badmouth me, okay, have at it. That's on you, not me. And this reality now where, and I think, listen, I'm not going to get into politics on this, but we're moving words, we're shifting like definitions of things, we're mixing things up, and sometimes you can make fun of people in a fun way, and sometimes you can make fun of people in a mean way, but it's the person who receives it and how they perceive it and how they internalize it. Like, sometimes just let it go. We have a thing in my house. Frozen was a big movie for young kids. I don't know if you've seen Frozen. Mm-hmm. But Elsa sings a song, Let It Go. And so we have anytime somebody's getting escalated over something silly, I say, hey, codename Elsa, like, just let it go. It's not worth the stress that it presents to you. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing as I've always taught about forgiveness, right? I forgive very quickly. Like, I just do, because to not forgive weighs on me more than anything else. And when does that pendulum shift back to, hey, the words aren't going to destroy you? And again, I'm not trying to be it's slavery and all the other things. I'm not getting into that. I'm just talking about, hey, you're a jerk. Well, okay, that's your opinion. Like, man, you know. So,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I want you to talk.
No, I think that goes back to what we were talking about, though, with those feelings. And I think it's always this pendulum shift, right? We're always trying to get to the middle, but for some reason, we always bypass the middle because we go from one extreme to the other, right? And it was this extreme of like, get over it, you're fine. And I think there were a lot of people who that was the message they were given, and they realized as they got to adulthood that I wasn't fine. Some of these things that people said to me did stick with me or did impact me. And now as an adult, I'm in therapy and I'm trying to unpack it. And I don't want my child to have to go through that. So then they swing that pendulum all the way to the other side because they're trying to prevent those feelings that they had to experience through their child. And now let's make everything equal. Let's make everything fair. Let's take everyone's feelings into account. And it's hard to say that it's coming from a place of ill intent, because I don't know that anybody's ever coming from a place of ill intent. They're always trying to come from a place of, I want to help prevent whatever negative feeling I went from going through from my child have to experience it. But it's always going to the other extreme. And if you think about it, if you watch any kind of, there's a show my son likes to watch called The Parenting Test. And it deals with different styles of parenting. And every parent then gets to critique how parents handled the situation with their child. But if you listen to the background story of those parents who go, when I was a child, this happened to me, you come to realize that your parenting is either you had a great childhood and you loved it and you had no problem, so you were just kind of mirroring your childhood, or you felt bad about whatever, and you've taken the extreme opposite stance that your parents took to parenting because of whatever negative experiences that you had growing up. And that's a common theme that I have seen with people. And I think most people feel like there was some kind of unjust system happening in their household growing up, or they didn't like some kind of parenting style that their parent did. But it all stems from this concept of, it's called generational trauma. And it's, usually for generational trauma, it means that, let me give a better example here. So let's say you had a parent who had some mental health needs. And so they parented a certain way that was maybe very harsh and a certain way. And then that person grows up to be a parent, and then they parent very harsh because that was how their parenting style was. And then eventually at some point in time, you've got several generations of somebody parenting a certain way that started generations ago from whatever trauma or issue that person dealt with. But now in this generation, that person goes, wait a minute, I don't like how this feels. I don't want to parent this way. These are all things that make me feel bad. So I'm going to take a polar opposite approach to how I'm parenting to try and fix these rights or these wrongs that have occurred from this generational trauma. So now you get that pendulum swing all the way to the other side because they're trying to undo what they felt like was this unjust way of parenting. And I think that's what we get when what you're mentioning, why people are now being so sensitive or bringing up things or trying to be fair is because we're trying to make up for things that have been happening for generations or in the past. And it's not necessarily a negative thing, but it is if we take that pendulum all the way to the other side. And I think most people do that because that's the only way we think things are going to change.
So I do another podcast where we focus on business growth and sort of the mental side of being an entrepreneur. And there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jason Selk who wrote a book called Relentless Solution Focus. And RSF is a mindset of you can lament whatever the scenario, situation, or negative is for 60 seconds. And the next 60 seconds, you have to do one thing in that moment that makes it better, right? It could be a very small thing. It could be, just get away from your desk for a minute or just push forward. I think it applies to major league athletes and big time. But the idea for me that we're so focused on trying to rewrite history rather than change the future is the problem. Like, yeah, I got paddled as a kid, right? And I got paddled for some reasons that I don't think it was deserved. My dad's the man, loved it, but it was a discipline tactic that was taken. And you can't do that anymore. And I don't do it anymore, right? But I can look back and say, I probably deserved it. Most of the time when it happened, I deserved it. It was out of line. I was unruly. I did something that was it was a known, unaccepted thing that I did. It was documented that you don't do this. And when you do it, this is the end result. Mm-hmm. So there was a consequence to the action that was taken on my side. Now, I don't do it with my kids, but I have swift and legitimate punishments that happen instantaneously on things that are just unacceptable. And it's okay to, and I want to reach into the rules piece and being a parent versus a friend, because that's a big deal to me as well. And then the second is I want to talk about the high school, college transition, mental health that we're seeing and all of that. But so.
Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge. Your support means everything to us. Please leave us a review and help us grow and help more families.
The part of the way my wife and I parent is the moment we get flummoxed, we turn to research and we start reading. How have other people dealt with this? What's the result? There's a lot of websites out there for helping parents and talk about different situations. Do it. So we go into research and then we apply something. And we have set very clear rules and boundaries for our children. And when they cross them, discipline is immediate, right? Mm-hmm. And we follow through. So I don't know what the example is of one of my 3-year-old. She's crying and whining over something, and she clearly wants help, but I can't understand what she said. She's got to go take a minute, calm down, and come back, use words. So it's very real thing. Most people would pick their kids up, try and coddle them until, I shouldn't say most people, but people will coddle, and it just perpetuates the behavior. Right? Mm-hmm. And so mine is, hey, go figure out how to calm yourself down. You're obviously worked up. I don't get upset about it. When she comes back, she uses her words to explain it. That's the parenting versus the friend versus the other piece too. And I think there's a lot of parents out there that, they want a buddy. And so the kid's a buddy. And I think there's a time for that, without question. But if you make that buddy situation too often and you fail to be the parent, you're going to end up with, again, a child that may not be able to cope, or a child that makes excuses for themselves. I hear a lot of parents make excuses for their children as their, well, you make the team, but it was this, and this. And you're going, okay, well, is that real? Or was he just number 11 and they were taking 10? Right? Yeah. Thoughts on that?
No, I agree with you. And that is something that I really try to take a hard line with my children as well, that I'm your parent. I'm not your friend. And I think that is important. And for whatever reason, this has been this growing thing where a lot of parents are taking this stance that I'm trying to be more buddy. And maybe that stems from own personal traumas. Maybe it just stems from that's the movement that's been occurring. But I do think from a perspective of trying to make sure that you have a healthy child who understands boundaries and structures, you have to be a parent first before you can be a friend. And I agree, there is a time and place for that. I think when your child is grown and they're adult, I very much hope I am friends with my children when they are adults. I have a great relationship with my parents now that I would see almost as more of a friendship than that parent-child relationship. But right now, it's important for me to be a parent because my job is essentially to work myself out of having a job as a parent. Ultimately, my job is to make sure that my child, if something were to happen to me, that they can function alone and independently and can be successful with the skill set that I've given them. And I think a lot of people don't realize too, that structure is not a bad thing. Boundaries are not a bad thing, especially for children and their brain development. They crave it. They want it. That's why children are constantly pushing the boundaries. You know how we say, oh, they're pushing the envelope, they're pushing the boundaries. They are doing that because they are testing them, but it's because they want to know where they are, because even though it might not seem like it, that is a secure feeling for them. But you're right. A lot of parents have gotten away from that. A lot of parents don't view it that way. And there is this need for acceptance. And it makes me wonder, what trauma did we all go through when we were younger, right? That we're now trying to seek the validation of our children. I don't know if it was we didn't feel like we got it from our parents, so we got to get it from our children, but it has become this increasing issue. And again, I think it's one more of those things where it's hard to just say, this is the reason why. There's multiple factors that have come into this kind of being this issue or concern that we're now facing as a collective parenting group.
And I think the point is very well taken, that there's a lot of external influence that is pushing all of this. It's not, you're not isolating one thing. I think reflecting back on your kind of first intro and the way you closed it was coping, right? Mm-hmm. And in all of these different things that we're discussing, teaching the way to cope is probably the best outcome you can have, right? Mm-hmm. Understanding bad things are going to happen in life. I mean, it is, you cannot escape. And sometimes, you just get kicked in the teeth and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. But you got to be able to get yourself back up. And I reflect back, I always end up in sports somehow. But it's not about how many times you get knocked down, it's about how many times you get back up. And I think there is a lack of that mentality at the same time. I want to transition and talk about where we're really passionate and where there have been some crazy shifts in mental health, which is, in the school district that we're in the middle of, there have been significant amount of suicides. It has been not a good scenario. It has affected, it's not just that it affects that student and that student family, it affects the community. It affects the students that knew that person. And there is this, and it's a problem on many levels, but one of the sides I've seen of it is, as a parent, I try not to expose my kids to certain things until they're ready for that exposure. And I think that suicide talking kids that they probably haven't even gone through, started puberty, or they're in the middle of it, and they're not even, they've never even driven a car or had a relationship or, had a fine glass of wine and some of the finer things in life, and they're ending it. And that exposes all these other kids to well, why did they do that? And the thought is, well, why would that person do that? And then they internalize that thought and then say, well, do I feel that way? And we're crossing so many lines of normalcy versus what is abnormal. And I think it's a tragic thing, but how can high school students help themselves? What are there? And because at some point there is that push away from the parents and that independent struggle. And the other thing I'll say is, we talk about the borders and pushing the envelope and pushing the lines. I never realized that at every single kind of step in life, they push a new line, right? Mm-hmm. My 11-year-old is like the sweetest kid, but my God, is she pushing a different boundary now than she's ever pushed before, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a constant test of pushing versus containing, and it gets exhausting at times. But what can a high school student do to really, maintain mental health when all the hormones are raging through the body, when the pressure is on for college, when your parents want you to be in the AP classes and just, make the varsity team and do this, and you got to be a starter, and you hit how do we calm them down a little bit?
I think this is actually where I turn to adults in this situation. And I think this is the time to really have some concrete conversations with your child. And they need to be age appropriate first off. Yep. And I've had these conversations with friends before, because I definitely think there are times when there are parents who are having conversations with kids who I don't know that I necessarily think that that's an age appropriate time to be talking about certain things, and more from a psychological perspective. I don't know that really young elementary school type of kids are ready to talk about sex or suicide or different things, but some parents feel like it's time to be honest. And I can't control all the parents in the world. All I can ask is, your child best, what your child is ready for and can handle, and you have to make the decision as a parent. But I do still at times think I wish we could all get on board of when psychologically is the best time to have these conversations, because then it does, if you expose your child to something, but I don't think my child is ready for it. The unfortunate thing is your child will come and tell my child about it. And now I have to talk to my child about it, even though I don't know that psychologically they were ready. So that was my side tangent. But back to your more direct question about high school students.
I don't want to underestimate what you're talking about, because the news every day there's a lot of insanity about when things should be taught, what should be taught at what ages. And, I remember back as a kid, we always had sex ed, right? Mm-hmm. Sex ed started the year before they expected everybody to hit puberty. So you knew what was going on. Right? Yeah,
like fifth grade. Yeah.
And they keep backing it up. And now we're talking about more diverse things that I wasn't ready for at 20 to talk about some of the stuff they want to talk about in middle school and elementary school. And so as a parent, that's I'm in the middle of managing that. And, I wrote a letter to the school district to get the curriculum that they were going to teach, so I could be armed to actually have the conversations the way I would as a parent, and to preface it, because I don't want, if those conversations are going to happen, then I need to be able to know what I'm defending or positioning and doing. So again, I think that's a real active parenting approach that has to happen there. But go ahead on the high school thing, because
100%. And before I move on to the high school, the one thing I'll say, and I don't honestly believe that I don't know that I personally, even from a psychological perspective, have come to a conclusion, because I understand that we have much more diverse family dynamics now, right, than we had even when you and I were in high school, right? I mean, the world has shifted so much in the last 20 years of what a family dynamic looks like. And I completely understand the need for, especially for children who have maybe more unique family dynamics, to feel represented, to feel like they're not left out, to feel like my family dynamic is represented. But it's still this new territory of, well, okay, am I ready to talk to my kid about that factor, though? Not that I'm against it, but I just don't know psychologically, do they understand that? Do they or do they not? And like I said, I don't know that I have even come to a conclusion or perspective, but I think it just is one more parenting challenge, because there are so many more dynamic pieces happening than I think there have ever been in the past when it came to having to talk about certain topics with your child. So just putting that out there, that even as somebody who is, this is my world, I'm still trying to understand how to approach and what is the best approach for students. So I'm very sympathetic to parents in the sense that it's not easy. There is no right answer. Nobody gave us a manual or a book of when to do things. So we're all trying to kind of come up with what is the best answer. But because we all have different perspectives on it, it definitely can make our work hard, because if you and I aren't on the same page, but our kids go to school together, then in some weird way, we are kind of having to work together to some degree. For high school students, though, I think it's really important for parents to talk to their kids about a lot of different things. I know kids, and it's funny, I have a 9 and I have an 11-year-old, and even my 9-year-old feels this pressure of needing to get certain grades, and it's not coming from me, and it's not coming from my husband. So I'm not sure where this pressure is coming from, but kids do. They feel all these pressures of, I have to be this, and I have to have this AP class, and I have to go through this in order to get into the college that I want to. And I really feel like this is our time as adults to really try to help our high school student go, I love you for who you are and what your interests are. I think one thing to keep in mind too is the world is changing. We grew up with you go to college, you get a job, and this is what's going to go on. This new Gen Z generation is ready to tear down what the standard way of success looks like. And I'm not necessarily against it. So I don't want to promote that you go to school, you go to get a job. Like, I just want my child to feel successful and happy. The message that I try to send to them is, you go and do whatever you want, but you need to make money. You need to be able to support yourself. But I don't care what that career looks like, as long as you're passionate about it. And I think that's the conversations that we need to have with our high school students. Like, if you want to take AP classes, great. If you don't, cool. Like, I just want you to feel like you can get up every day and you can go to school, because that's a big challenge for a lot of students right now. And we can talk about that too, if you want, but I just want you to be able to go, and I want you to feel successful. And I want you to feel like you are getting what you need in order to come out of college and feel like you can take on the world. I am always very honest with my children. I have ADHD. I didn't know it till I was 30. I struggled in school. I hated school. And so I almost had to spend 10 years out of college trying to build back my confidence of like, oh, wait, I'm a lot more capable and a lot smarter than I ever thought I was. And I don't want my kids, or any child for that matter, to have that same experience, because school is kind of this one size fits all. And so many kids now don't fall into it. We've had too many things happen in society as far as technology goes, as far as what a job looks like, as far as what success looks like, that I don't feel like our educational system reflects that. And so a lot of really talented and really smart kids are going through school, not feeling successful, having to come out, having to find themselves. But I think that's where the adults have to come in and sit down and go, don't worry about what high school looks like. Let's focus on what makes you happy, what makes you feel successful. What is your drive? What is your passion? Let's not compare ourselves to, our friend Timmy or our friend Sarah. Like, what is it that you need? What are you trying to get out of? What do you need to get prepped to feel successful? And I think that's where we have to have these conversations with our kids. I'm not saying like, tell your kid, oh, it's cool, go fail everything. But are you putting your best foot forward? Are you putting your effort? What is your focus going to be? How can I help you in trying to figure out what your steps after high school are going to be like? Because maybe high school isn't your jam, but maybe trade school or college or starting a business is going to really light you up. So what classes or skills do we need to work on now? What do you need to feel successful now? And that's, I think, the biggest thing, not just as a parent, but if you're a teacher or just a mentor, or even just somebody who's an uncle who has a great relationship with your niece or nephew, to have these relationships with students, let them know that you had struggles too, that you had challenges, that, it wasn't smooth sailing for you all the time either. Because I think that was one of the biggest things when I was growing up. You never heard adults talk about the challenges that they face. It was always kind of put back on you. Like, you just need to do these things in order to be successful. But the adult never said, I struggled here, or I had this issue. So I think if we can be more transparent with high school kids, because they are ready to have those types of conversations psychologically, that will go the distance for them. And I think in terms of trying to help with that prevention of the suicidal ideation, I think it's time to be real with them and say, you have a lot of feelings going on. It's normal to have a lot of feelings going on. 16 is crazy. I remember when I was 16 and what it felt like, and the hormones and everything felt like the end of the world, because your world is so small right now. And so everything feels like it's the end of the world. But I promise you, it's going to even out. It's going to get better. It's going to feel a lot better once you have some experience and some time on your side. And I think those are just the conversations that we need to have with kids, and just being open and honest with them.
Yeah, some great points. And, talking back to the mental health and the idea of, one generation's struggle becomes the next generation, and this idea, what did you call it? Generational
trauma.
Generational trauma. Mm-hmm. I think in kind of trying to bring a correlation together, my parents' generation, there was success as a parent really included the college that your children went to, right? Mm-hmm. There was this pedigree environment, and this was pre all the ranking systems and all the stuff. This was just like, Ivy or next level or big state or engineer or lawyer or doctor. And like the parents hung their own personal success as a parent on where the kids went. And in kind of thinking through that generational trauma thing, like now you have a generation of people who are sort of doing the same thing, trying to push a square peg into a round hole. And it doesn't have to be that way. And listen, I'm in the business of getting kids to college. So for the kids that it's right. It just is. Mm-hmm. But I think as parents, you got to settle down. Like take a deep breath. Is it right? Don't force it, because it's way too expensive to just throw the money down the drain. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And there's another concept in economics they call utility, which is essentially satisfaction. And, it's the idea of like, if you spend money here, what's the utility in that spend versus the utility in this spend? And if I buy a bag of Doritos, how much satisfaction do I get? Or if I save it and turn that dollar into $7, do I get more economic utility? And I think the idea that we have to focus on more for these students is satisfaction. Like, mm-hmm. How do you feel proud of what you do and satisfied with your direction, rather than always, trying to be the next mogul or the next TikTok superstar or the next influencer, And in a lot of ways, I think there's a lot of shortcuts to success now, which I don't like, but it's reality.
Yeah.
There's two things that I want to ask, comment, and get a response from you. One of the things that I try and teach my kids every day is gratitude, because I think gratitude is something that is missing in a lot of children. They're more entitled than they ever have been. They're more expectant of whatever they want. They, give me your phone. I want to watch TV in the middle of a restaurant. Like, no, that's a firm no for me, right? I'm not going to judge parents that do it, but no, I'm going to talk to my kids while I'm sitting at the dinner table with them. And so I teach gratitude, and then I also encourage my children to fail. And I think and I don't encourage them like, hey, don't go fail, don't go out to fail, but try new things. And if they don't work out, hey, you learn something, right? And so I encourage them to go and to push and to do more. And so gratitude and failure have been a very strong component of my kids trying different things. And I'll tell you what, it has led to my kids really identifying sports that they love, as opposed to just doing what sport I did. And the instruments and the music and the choir, do it all. Go to the stage crew, do the plays. But they really, if you don't give them the opportunity to fail at something, they don't realize, it's not really for me. I'm going to try this thing and see if it's the next thing. And then my patented line every time my kids leave the house: do your best and forget the rest. There's one other piece that I think is very important here. For a lot of parents, tell their kids they can be whatever they want. They can absolutely be whatever they want, and you can. But you can only be whatever you want if you put your head down and you work hard to get there. And I think that's the part that is missing in some of the parenting. Is like, yeah, you can get there, but I'm going to tell you that pathway to be that. Here's what it looks like. And if you want to do it, then I encourage and will support every aspect of the journey. But you could certainly be an astronaut. They can't. You're not studying your math. You're not doing the work. You're not getting to the point where So go ahead. The time is yours.
No. I think every point that you just made is incredibly valuable. I am the same way with failure with my kids. I try to tell my kids all the time that I encourage failure. I don't have anything wrong with failure. As long as you did your best, as long as you gave it everything you could, failing is okay. Sometimes you learn the best lessons from failure, or sometimes failure is what you need to be able to push you to that better idea or that better way of doing it. I think we have this mentality that failure is such a horrible, negative thing, and God forbid if it happened. But actually, failure can be really healthy, because not only can it lead you to the discovery that you need, or maybe it prevents you from going down the wrong path, but I really do try to encourage with my children too, that I'm okay with failure as long as you went into it doing the best that you could, and that you use the failure as an opportunity, as a teachable moment. What do I now know from this experience that I can take with me to either build upon or improve the next time? So I 100% am with that. And I agree with you too on the factor that I think it is important to let kids know they can do whatever they want. But you're right. Like I think we don't focus on okay, if this is what you want to do, though, this is the work that is necessary or that you have to do in order to reach that goal. And we don't put a lot of emphasis on that. And I don't know if it's because we just figure kids will figure it out, or we don't want to shoot down their dreams, or what it is, but we haven't been putting the emphasis on, if this is what you want, sure, but here's what you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to buckle down. And I think to some degree, I don't know, we'll use TikTok as an example. Kids are seeing that it seems like, oh, I just go on and I become an influencer, or I just put myself out there, and there's this automatically happening. I mean, kids have a shorter attention span, right? And TikTok has definitely contributed to that. I only want my information in 15-second increments. And so it is much harder for kids to really sustain long-term goals. I think that's one of the biggest challenges kids have right now, that it's not this instant success, that sometimes it takes years of work and dedication. And maybe we just don't talk about that enough anymore. And we have to help kids understand that failure is going to be part of the process. Time is part of the process, but you've got to get up every day, and you've got to put one foot in front of the other and take steps to work towards that goal, and not just expect that the goal is going to happen. There is a very small elite amount of people who will get to wake up one day and just have this moment that somebody found them, something happened, and it changed their life overnight. I'm still waiting for that moment to happen for me. I welcome it wholeheartedly, right? I wouldn't shun it in any way, but it's the exception to the rule. It's not the rule. Most of us will have to spend time working every day towards getting to what we want to achieve.
I think one of the biggest things there that I've had to almost teach some of the parents that we work with is the managing expectations, right? It is you can do what you want, but if that's the pathway you're going to go, this is what it's going to require. And it may not. And the more that you kind of don't have the right expectation, I can't tell you how many families I meet with in like an initial consultation and say, my student's great. They're going to get a full ride wherever they go. Okay, you're setting that up for, not just setting it up for failure, but then when it doesn't happen, now you're basically, this kid's going to feel like they failed. They're not good enough, right? And managing expectations, at least on the college side, I know can be so stressful, one for parents, but extremely stressful for the students, because it may not be what they want to hear. And guess what, guys? You may not get into every school, but when you manage that expectation, say, this is what's going to happen. You're going to be applying to these schools. They have a 3% acceptance rate. You got a shot. There's 97% of people that are not going to get in. It does not mean that you're a failure if that happens. And I think I kind of go back in all the different conversations we've had about how we were raised. I know that what my father did, I always joke about it now because he's my friend, but I don't think he became my friend until I was like 26. But he was a parent of I kind of remember when it happened. But I used to joke and say, like, it was amazing how well he could predict the future. That's what when I look back on it now, I said, my God, you predicted this, you predicted that, and it was all these things that happened in my life where really all he was doing was trying to manage the expectation. Like, this is what you're going to do. It's either going to be this or that. And it's not that hard to have potential two outcomes. But when one of them happened, I was like, my God, he knew exactly what was going to happen. He didn't. He just gave it these are the two ends of the spectrum. But I think knowing that and kind of knowing what it is the expectations and managing it are great. The piece that I always highlighted, there was years ago, Dave probably knows this. I thought I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to pursue acting. And this is, again, when my father was still a parent, not a friend. Mm-hmm. He said, what do you want to do? I said, okay, I want to be an actor. He said, okay, when are we going out to LA? I said, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, we'll fly out there next week and we'll find an apartment. We'll start looking at agents. And I was like, well, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And he was like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, if this is what you want to do, let's do it. Mm-hmm. And I immediately was like, okay, I don't want to be an actor. So it was a shot, but he was there to back me. Right. Mm-hmm. And I was very passionate about, I was doing local acting and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But as soon as it came to that point, like, okay, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Well, I wasn't that passionate about it. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of was weird. Like he immediately pushed me to that point and I said, yeah, maybe this isn't for me. Mm-hmm. And then I was done with it. Once I knew, and he was ready to go all in on it. And I said, I'm not. Mm-hmm. He didn't even have to say, then what are you doing? I was able to tell myself, I was like, well, if I wasn't willing to do that, maybe this isn't the right pathway for me. So I think I love the way you put that when you were talking about, yes, you can be anything you want, but you got to support it. Right. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden when my parents did support it, I realized that isn't what I really wanted. Maybe it was just a facade. Maybe it was, I was happy where I was at, but it wasn't going to get me where I needed to be. Mm-hmm. And that's where he kind of still pushed me and that's where I am today now. So I think the managing expectations piece is a really big part. But as you said, Dave, with work hard and no matter you do what you want to do, you got to work hard on it. I think if it's something you're truly passionate about, like I wasn't about acting, it is easier to work hard.
Oh, great.
And we joke and say, the old adage, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. No, not true.
It's not. I love what I do. And it feels like work on a regular basis.
Like I love what we do, but I still got to get here. I got to run the meetings. I got to do the backlog. I get back work. It's work. Work is work. Even if you love it, right? Yeah. It's still work.
But 100%. It makes doing the work a lot easier. Yeah. It makes getting up in the morning and coming into the office. Yes.
It's a satisfaction.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I thought there were some great points. I just wanted to chime in one last time before we ended today.
No, I love it.
We are coming down, but I want to make one more comment because I didn't complete the thought on the sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. The continuation of that, and I was telling the story about, the older kids in the neighborhood. I somewhere along the way was either taught or realized in my own right that like, I'm going to use that as motivation and I'm not going to let it happen to me again. Like I remember playing tennis baseball out in the yard and, I'm in fifth grade and playing with 15, 16, 17-year-olds and they're just mowing me down. Right. And I can't even come close to hitting it. I just worked harder so that I could hit it next time. Right. And so I think there's another piece of this whole parenting thing where a bad situation, if talked about appropriately, can turn into a solid motivation to do something. My daughter's 100%. Right now is to play Division I college softball. Right. She works hard at softball. She doesn't work hard enough. We know this because my wife was a Division I softball player and says, listen, I threw 400 pitches into a mattress every single day. You do it 2 times a week. Like and at some point you've got to make the decision yourself to go. She's also a swimmer and every third or fourth practice, she wants to skip. Yeah. I'm like, hey, I really don't care if you skip practice. I really don't. I know how bad swim practice is. I did it for a long time. Mm-hmm. But by making that choice, you are giving up the back end of your swimming career, right? Because swimming is one of those things where it doesn't. If you're not in the pool, you're not getting better. It does. It is an everyday commitment. And the story Michael Phelps told about, he didn't miss a practice for 5 years to be a world-class Olympic athlete. He didn't miss a practice, a workout, a meal for 5 straight years. That's that commitment and discipline is required. So I think there's and this other concept that motivation wanes. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline is what you do when you're unmotivated to an end result that you desire, right? And so I think, again, I could talk about this for days, as you can tell. I love this. I think what you're doing is amazing. And I hope it's having an effect. And I hope this podcast gets to the right families that are struggling with this stuff. And it all comes back to talking about it, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's have open conversation, not on some levels, right? And not at some ages, but age appropriate open conversations about things make a big difference. And I think there's another thing too that parents don't realize when their kids really are ready for a conversation.
Yeah.
Eyes up, go into it. And you may be thinking this is a subject matter they're not ready to hear about. They probably already heard about it. So step in and ask the question first to validate that the conversation should happen.
Agreed. 100% agree. This has actually been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed speaking with both of you. I feel like I could talk to both of you for hours on this, and there's so many different channels we could go down.
And it applies to everything. And the last story I'll tell, I have a client whose daughter really, really wanted to go to a reach school. And a reach school, for anybody listening, is one that the odds are not in your favor to get in, right? Based on the general metrics that they publish. And as expected, she didn't get in. She was pretty devastated until I saw her. Mm-hmm. And I had a conversation. I said, listen, you can't, that it was not meant to be, right? They didn't see something in you. And so why would you be upset? It's like the girl that you have a crush on, but she thinks you're ugly. Like, don't waste your life chasing that. It's never going to
Why would you want that?
Right?
Yeah.
Let it go. And find the fit, find the social, emotional, academic, financial fit for your family. And that wasn't it. Would it have been cool to say you got in? Yeah, but reality was probably getting in and going would have led to a transfer to a different school because you wouldn't have been happy there. So again, I think managing expectations and having conversations is my takeaway here.
Yeah.
Agreed. Couldn't agree more. This has been a fantastic conversation. And I hope the families listening really recognize that we're all kind of in this together. We're all facing some of the same challenges, right? But ultimately, having those conversations with your child is one of the big key components to helping and aiding in their success.
Yeah, and it takes a village took on a new expression after talking to you because you're intertwined by who people are around regardless. So it really does. Anyway, Kristen, fantastic. Appreciate it. Would love to have you on again.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
This has been College Knowledge.
We can send your student to the school of their dreams and send you to your dream retirement. Visit us at elitecollegiateplanning.com to get started. Thanks for listening to the College Knowledge Podcast with your hosts, Dave Kozak and Joe Kerins. We hope you enjoyed this week's exploration of higher education, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. That's all for this episode. See you next time.